Shalom. This week we are reading Parshat Vayera, meaning "and he appeared," beginning with Genesis chapter 18 and verse 1. As this Torah portion opens, Abraham is healing from his circumcision and is receiving a visit from the Almighty himself, who appeared to him, the word Vayera, and he appeared, in order to visit his friend Abraham, who, at age 99, was painfully convalescing on the third day after his operation. And God, in keeping with his own commandment, came to fulfill the mitzvah of visiting the sick. Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent, waiting for a human visitor, though, because for him, the opportunity to bestow acts of kindness was even more important than a visit from God himself, since by acting with loving kindness, one is actually imitating God and thus bringing his light into this world. But God had made it extraordinarily hot that day in order to spare Abraham, in his state of pain, the difficulty of looking after the needs of guests. But seeing as how the pain Abraham endured as a result of not being able to engage in chesed, kindness, was even more painful to him than his physical discomfort, lo and behold, he looks up and sees three wayfarers, in reality angels sent by God, in order to enable Abraham to do his thing. But all that is another story. And there's so much more in this Torah portion. This week's Parshat Vayera, it's so rich and sprawling. We have the promise of the birth of a son, Abraham's intercession for Sodom and its ultimate destruction, the unseemly birth of Ammon and Moab, Sarah's abduction by Avimelech, Isaac's birth, Hagar and Ishmael, and perhaps above all, Abraham's 10th and final test, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, the perplexing, angst-filled command to bind Isaac as an offering at the place that was to become the altar in the Holy Temple. But today, I'd like to talk about one small verse, might seem small, which might seem insignificant. After Abraham's alliance with Avimelech at Beersheba, and right before his test of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, in chapter 21 and verse 33, we find the following verse. It states, "And he planted an eshel in Beersheba, and he called there in the name of Hashem, in the name of the Lord, the God of the world." Now, the most common translation that I find for this verse, just a moment, the most common translation that I find for this verse, especially those who are familiar with the non-Jewish Bibles, is Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And besides the fact that this is entirely inaccurate, first of all, what's a tamarisk tree? I've been around a lot, and I don't know. I never heard of a tamarisk tree, so I looked it up, because he planted an eshel, which is being translated as a tamarisk tree. So the genus Tamarix, or salt cedar, is composed of about 50 to 60 species of flowering plants in the family Tamariskae, native to drier areas of Eurasia and Africa. The generic name originated in Latin may have referred to the Tamarus River in Hispania, Tarraconensis, Spain. They are evergreen or deciduous shrubs, 1 to 18 meters in height and forming dense thickets. The largest, Tamarix aphylla, is an evergreen tree that can grow up to 18 meters tall. They usually grow in saline soils, tolerating up to 15,000 ppm, maybe you know what that means, soluble salt, and can also tolerate alkaline conditions. And there's much more to tamarisk trees, but I'll thankfully skip that. Just put that on the side for a moment. Now, in the Talmud, the sages provide a deep insight into this verse by employing a play on words, which is one of their methods for delivering homiletical lessons. Because you see, the verse states in Hebrew, Vayita eshel, he planted an eshel, tamarisk tree, Beersheba, Vayikra sham, and he called there B'Shem Hashem Kil Olam. He called there in the name of Hashem, the God of the world. So the sages say, don't read this word as Vayikra, and he called, but read it as Vayakri, meaning, and he proclaimed. So not like he called out to God, or even he called out in the name of God, but rather read it as there he proclaimed in the name of God. Amazingly, this particular translation is actually 100% the way the Art Scroll translates it here, we find he planted an eshel in Beersheba, and there he proclaimed the name of Hashem, God of the universe. But getting back to that tamarisk tree, for the life of me, I don't know where that comes from. The fact is, the word eshel in Hebrew, here, he planted an eshel, is an acronym. 3 letters, Aleph, Shin, and Lamed. It's an acronym that stands for the 3 Hebrew words ochel, which is food, shtia, which is drink, and lina, which means sleeping or lodging. Abraham planted, meaning he established, an inn in Beersheba, and there he proclaimed in the name of Hashem, the God of the world, God of the universe. But if this is not about a tree, if this is not about the tamarisk tree, as I read to you from Wikipedia, but rather it's the eshel is an inn, why this expression of planting? So back to the Talmudic lesson about reading this verse as Abraham's proclaiming, the sages ask, how was this? How was this done? What was the modus operandi of his proclaiming, of his proclamation? And they teach us that this verse instructs us that Abraham proclaimed the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, and caused his name to be proclaimed by the mouth of every passerby. How? Abraham fed all these people from his own pocket, provided for all their needs, and a person would finish eating and drinking and finish his stay in Abraham's free hotel, and the individual would start to thank Abraham and bless him. Then Abraham would say, wait, stop. You think this is mine, what you're eating? You think you owe me something? You think I gave you something that was mine? No, 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 he said. The God of the world has fed you. You've eaten of his provisions. So give praise and thanks and blessings to the one who spoke and brought forth all of creation. In other words, our father Abraham planted his attribute of chesed, of kindness, of God's kindness, of everything ultimately coming from God, in the hearts of the entire world. Everybody he was able to meet. Giving hospitality to guests, providing them with food and drink and a place to sleep the night and seeing them off. In other words, connecting to them with love on a heartfelt level. That is really what it means that he planted an eshel in Beersheba, because the Midrash explains, why are the words of the sages called planting? It's an idea that the words of the sages are called planting. Because they say, just like the roots of a tree take root and spread out in every direction, they enter into, so too, they say the words of wise men enter into a person, and they take root in a person's whole body. Now, through these insightful words, we can understand the use of this word planting, vayita, in the context of Abraham and his life work. How much more so did Abraham's words enter into a person and become like a planting, raising up many seedlings of chesed, of kindness. But there's something else. And here's where you have to open up your heart in the deepest way. It says here, he called out, or he proclaimed, in the name of Hashem El Olam, in the name of Hashem, God, the God of the world. This expression, El Olam, the God of the world, believe it or not, this is unbelievable. I checked this. This is the only place in the entire Tanakh where the phrase, the God of the world, appears. El Olam. This is the only place. Only here in Genesis 21:33. In the context of the life work of Abraham. Because what else did Abraham do? It's on his account and it's in his merit that God is known to the entire world. Indeed, he called out there in Beersheba, because through the holiness and the strength of his prayers and through the selfless deeds of his life, he paved the way for every person in the world that wants to ultimately find God and to pray to him and to call out to him and to awaken, to invoke the merit of Abraham. And that's what it means when the sages say, kind of whimsically, don't read it as, and he called there in the name of Hashem, the God of the world, but rather read it as, and he proclaimed there. Because what he did was, he paved a path and he opened an opening in the fiber of the world for us as well. And through this righteousness and purity, and above all, through his burning love for God, which he was ready so many times to lay down his life to proclaim that God exists to the whole world, that there is a creator and a master of the universe, one and unique. Through that, that was the proclamation. He made it possible for every spiritual seeker to make the connection. That's what Avraham planted. Now, it's really amazing to think about the fact that in this very parsha that showcases Avraham's obsession, and I say that in a very positive way, with hospitality, we find the polar opposite, the diametric opposite, the city of Sodom, which was condemned by God for destruction, was famous, or rather infamous, in that there, hospitality was a crime punishable by death. We have a famous concept the Midrash tells us about the bed of Sodom. When a person would unfortunately wander into Sodom by mistake and ask to be put up for the night, they had a bed there which everybody had for when, if a guest would wander in, one size fits all. If a person was too tall and didn't fit in the bed, they would cut off his legs. And if a person was too short, they would stretch him till he fit. Is this literal? Is this literal? Is this a parable? I don't think that's the point. The point is their attitude about chesed, about kindness, about society, about a person caring for another person was totally rotted away. In fact, what we find in this week's Torah portion, when Lot's wife was punished for looking back, whatever that's all about, that's another whole story. She's turned into a pillar of salt. Rashi says the reason that she was turned into a pillar of salt has to do with hospitality. It's because she was unwilling to offer salt for the guests for food. When two angels came to Lot and he prepared a meal for them, apparently he said to her, get some salt for the meal for the guests, and she said, oh, this nasty attribute also, this horrible custom you want to bring to us also of offering something to guests? So when God decided that the time had come for Sodom to be destroyed, what did he say? He said, shall I conceal from Abraham what I do? Now that Abraham is surely to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by him, for I have loved him, because he commands his children and his household after him that they keep the way of Hashem, doing charity and justice, in order that Hashem might then bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of him. So Abraham stood, as he's called, Avraham HaIvri, Abraham the Hebrew. The word Ivri, Hebrew, means from the other side, because he stood on one side of the world. And look what's going on in the very same Torah portion. So his overwhelming character trait is chesed, is kindness. Chapter 31, the last chapter of the book of Proverbs, in the famed description known as the woman of valor, Eshet Chayil, we find a strange expression in verse 26. We read, V'torat chesed al leshona. It reads, the Torah of kindness is on her tongue. Now, what is this Torah chesed, the Torah of kindness? Is there another type of Torah? Is there a Torah that is kind and a Torah that is unkind? Ask our sages. What do these words mean? This is the secret of Abraham. Abraham held steadfast to the attribute of loving kindness in order to share his Torah and everything he had with everybody that he possibly could. That was his Torah. And the most important, precious thing of all that he had to share with everyone he possibly could was the knowledge that there's one God, the knowledge of the Creator. So yes, there is say our sages, there's a Torah of chesed and a Torah that is not kindness. What's the Torah of kindness, they say? The Torah of kindness is the Torah we teach to others, that we don't keep to ourselves, that we want to share. The other Torah is a person who keeps all his knowledge and all his great ideas to himself, so that only he could be considered special and will be revered or honored or thought of highly for his knowledge. Truly, one who doesn't keep anything for themselves, is emulating the way of Abraham, one who truly seeks to emulate the Almighty himself, a person of true kindness. Such a person, like Abraham, will want to share everything that he has, especially knowledge of the one God, with everyone, so that all will know that Hashem is God. As King David tells us himself in Psalms 89:3, Olam chesed yibaneh, the world was built on kindness.